Welcome to the ADHDan Podcast, where we clearly haven't learned our lesson and we're still talking about politics and religion. All right. Again, I have with me Paul Hamilton, which actually, Paul, I realized today that you have 2 records with the podcast right now.
2 records? Wow. Yeah.
The one is the most views.
Wow.
And 2, the closest back-to-back guest that I've had so far. So,
well, it was funny after the first one. It's like, there are a couple of things I could have said differently and stuff like that. But
right.
It's funny because you and I talked about doing this, and then
I do want to kind of be clear. That was the intention originally. Like we wrapped, and you were like, "Man, there was so much more I wanted to talk about. I wanted to elaborate." So. Here's your opportunity. Yeah. So, how has your past 2 weeks been?
It's been interesting. It's been very interesting. It was when I listened back, there were a couple things that I said that the people that I know that listened to it that came back and said, well, and asking them to listen to it critically. They said, when you kind of talked about the Bible, you made it sound like you don't use it much or you don't encourage people to read it, which is way far from the truth, especially if you've come to our church or know me. We use the Bible. The point I was making then was that there are parts that need to be weighed differently. And again, you and I talked before, I have to quit saying that because I'll say it 80,000 times this evening, that there are contradictions in the Bible. And they can all be explained, they can all be discussed, all those types of things. But when we read through and somebody comes to me and they're like, well, this doesn't necessarily work with this. And it's like, well, you're correct. And let's talk about that a little bit and why. And we definitely put a lot more weight on the words and the teachings and the example and the character and the actions and the way Jesus carried himself with other people. And that, to us, is the ultimate, the North Star, the penultimate, whatever word you want to use. That's the most important to us because it can be very confusing. We do use the Old Testament. I just gave a series out of the Old Testament with Joseph and his brothers and the way that God was with him through a number of different situations. And that, that's a lesson for us, to take. So I just wanted to make it clear that we use the Bible. I encourage people to read the Bible. But when I said that there are a whole lot of books around the Bible that help me understand and help other people understand the Bible better, it's not that I discount the Bible, because I don't. That's still the first book that I go to. But then, I feel like I'm a small fish in a small pond. I'm not a full-time pastor. I didn't go to a bachelor's in theology. I don't have a master's in divinity. I don't have a doctorate. And it's important for me to seek out people that have a lot more knowledge than I do. And that knowledge turns into wisdom, and that's a biblical lesson as well. When you're in the middle of something, Paul reminds us in the New Testament that there's not anything that we're going to go through that somebody else hasn't gone through before us. And that if we can find those people, we're going to be better. I think we talked about that last time. But it's I rely on those people. And it's not just one person. There are 20, 30, 40 people that's all they do. That's their full-time job. It has been their full-time job for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And they understand these things so much better. And they write entire books on how they explain. I think you and I talked about homosexuality last time, and the gentleman that wrote the book, 25 years ago, that was used for so many, thousands of churches to use to keep homosexuals out or to put them into conversion therapy or to do all kinds of horrible things. And then he came back later and wrote another book. And it wasn't just hey, here's a verse and this is why I changed my mind. It was, he laid out in thousands and thousands and thousands of words using hundreds of Bible verses on how he came up to that. And that's kind of, how I work and how I do it. I wanted to make it clear. We use the Bible every single week. I think you and I were trading some text back and forth. How are you supposed to learn about Jesus without the Bible? You're correct. Those letters in there that contain stories of his life, that's where we take the primary teachings that we have, and then everything else kind of layers up to it.
Right. And I think something that goes along with that, what I've heard you say before, is about how God may speak to each one of us
Yes.
a little differently.
Yes.
So I think finding other books from people who maybe God spoke to in a different fashion, then you can kind of take that, and you're not taking it all as gospel,
right?
But you can kind of learn from it
Yeah.
and help you to better understand.
Well, the example that I have with that, again, is probably the largest, that's not putting it correctly, the group of people that come to me that really just in the midst of a lot of pain and struggle are people that grew up in the church but then have a child that is gay, or has a child with a friend that is gay, and they come to me having grown up in the church like we were taught, and I haven't had a conversation with my child yet about this, and where are you coming from? And I said, well, if you're willing to spend a little bit of time, we can have a discussion. And I have given out literally hundreds of books to people as a complement to the Bible to help them understand. Here are what a lot of people, a lot smarter than I am, are saying about this particular issue and this particular topic and this particular subject, having so much experience and having done their research and things like that. So I'm not sitting in front of them saying, well, here's one verse that counters that one, so you're good. It's very important to lay a foundation of where these things are coming from, because it can be very, very confusing. It always takes an investment of time to understand, to make that change from, the churches that we grew up in. And, a lot of people deconstruct from and then reconstruct in a different way. That reconstruction always involves spending time with educated people. Again, like I talked about, that have, written all of these other books that help with the Bible, help to make the Bible more clear, help put things into perspective, what was going on at the particular time, and, all these different things that, kind of help. So, but to round that back, it comes back to, and I know that you received a number of comments, on that the Bible was kind of discounted, and that's definitely 100% not where we're coming from. I trust a lot of people that are a lot smarter than me. And I think one of the things that makes me personally a little bit different from a lot of people in my position, it's funny when you put out the show, you had quotes around the word pastor, and a lot of people, it kind of freaked them out a little bit, I think. And we talked before that I don't let people call me pastor. Again, that word has weight. And, I appreciated the quotes, because when people come in and they're like, oh, Pastor Paul, I'm like, no, it's just Paul. And I want to make sure that you and I understand we're on even keels when it comes to this book and our Savior. And I'm interested in learning where you're coming from, what you're struggling with, and what it is that you're looking to learn.
Mm-hmm. I think the main thing that really fascinated me about the negative comments and just was just how emotionally charged a conversation about God can be.
I can appreciate that.
And I think part of the reason is because nobody knows for sure, yet everyone knows for sure. And like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, so, it's interesting. I listened to the service, that you and I had talked about that a little bit. And, at the end of the day, from their perspective, I am a heretic. I'm participating in heresy. Now, we have to understand that word. First, there's polity. All right. Polity is a strange word that doesn't come up a lot, but polity is the way that an organization is structured. Our government democracy is a polity. Our local government is a polity. The local Little League organization that runs Little League is a polity. So churches have polity. Denominations have polity, and then that flows down into individual churches. And churches that are independent, they have their own organization and their own structure. Then within that structure of people, there's what's called dogma. And dogma is what they believe and what they stand behind and what they stand on and what is not negotiable in their world. So when you look at a particular person saying you are a heretic, and knowing enough about, just from listening to that message, because I don't listen to a lot of other people's messages, I don't believe in some of the things that they said and the way that they said it. So that does make me a heretic in their word, in their world. I would never call anybody else a heretic for not believing what I believe in. And I think that's what sets our community apart. I mean, we use the word church, but it's the same thing with pastors. Sometimes you go up to people and say church, and that, it's triggering to them because of what they've come from. And we've made a concerted effort. We talk about a community of Jesus followers, and we are a church of Christians as well. But sometimes you say that to people and it just instantly turns them away. And we're here believing that we're trying to get a message of life to them, from our Savior. So what makes me different is when somebody comes in and says, I disagree with you with what you're doing. The trigger word in our last podcast was that I don't believe there's a hell. If somebody comes in and says, well, I believe there is a hell, I say, well, that's okay. And if you'd like to talk about that more, it's okay. You're welcome here. You're welcome to participate here. Please understand that, if your children are participating in our children's programs, that we're not talking about hell, Satan, or inherent sin. That's something that can be addressed later when things move on. But we don't want you to quote unquote fall in line. Now, again, that church that, had that particular message, it's a wonderful organization. They're doing a lot of good within the community. They are, they have a group of people that love and care for one another, and that's fantastic. And it's great that they have an environment where people can come and they can feel like they are receiving the message of Jesus. Our message of Jesus is just a little bit different because of the way that we weight things within the Bible. And just like you said, nobody knows for sure, right? 'Cause we have this book. There are things around the book, but a lot of people say, you can't go out, that's apocryphal. I love that word.
Yeah. And
there's some amazing lessons within those books as well. And a group of men at some point back in, 300, 400, whatever, when the Bible was put together, 300 something, they decided, well, these books don't belong. And they decided. And, we get into, the inspired Word of God. And we believe that the Word of God is Jesus, and we believe that the words Jesus spoke are the Word of God. And, the Word of God can also be, lessons that He, gave to people, but not necessarily in the words that He gave them. So anyhow, I've been talking a lot there.
No,
but it's the I wanted to address that thing because it was, it was suggested that, we are with the way that we're, conducting ourselves and the way that we're conducting our community, that, we're sending people to hell. And that is just not what we believe. And again, to sit down with, somebody that walks in the door and says, hey, I'm scared to death of going to hell and I want to make sure that I'm doing things right. And it's like, hey, we believe a little bit differently. Are you interested in kind of, having that discussion? We're not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying I'm right, but we're happy to, have that conversation. And I'm still having that conversation with people today that have come in. I've read books that they've asked me to read. They've asked books that they've read books that I've asked them to read or actually, purchased for them. We just keep going down this road and not everybody comes to that. Well, I believe exactly what you believe, but I think that's what's different about our particular community. We talked about Noah's Ark, last time. Did that actually happen, or was that a story that was told? In our world, it doesn't matter. whether you believe it actually happened. If you believe that the earth is 6,000 years old or billions of years old, doesn't matter. People come in and say, well, it was the Big Bang. And my comment to them is, oh, so that's how he did it.
Yeah.
And, the response is like, well, wait a minute. Like, nobody's ever said that to me before. And, my relationship with Christ is completely different than every single other person's relationship in our church. And when it comes down to, you need to believe this because I said so, or because our group of people said so, it doesn't sit well with me. Right. Because somebody could have a completely different lived experience. It's Mother's Day, tomorrow. We just left church this evening. We talked a lot about mothers and women and things like that. And, there are churches today that won't let women in the pulpit. There are women pastors within our denomination. We have a woman pastor, at our church with us. She gave a message this evening. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. But there are churches that we believe women should not be in the pulpit. And we are not that hard on any line. People can come in our door and say, I don't believe in Jesus Christ. I don't, this whole Bible thing, God, but I'd kind of like to just, follow along. Great. You're more than welcome. Come on in, participate wherever you want to participate. And you're here. There are many like you that are struggling with this particular teaching or, what they heard here. There are people that have grown up in environments where, hell and fear, if you don't do this, you're going to hell. People are in therapy today because of that. Professional therapy, not, going to talk to your pastor who's going to eventually, you're going to see the light, or you don't have enough faith, or you're not believing the right things. They actually have emotional and mental trauma from being scared to death, and PTSD and, things like that. So
I, for one, if you haven't noticed, you've probably been noticing me around the community a little more. I fit into that boat. Like I've told you before, I made a video about it. I don't consider myself a Christian. I have a lot of questions. I know that they're questions that I may never have the answer to while I'm on this earth.
Right.
But what I take from your church is the community. And I just like having somewhere to go, people who are just uplifting and positive. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Jesus, with the people that he asked to follow him, with every single one of them, it was, come on along. It wasn't, hey, you need to, and you better, and here. Jesus didn't use fear. He didn't use guilt. Now, there's some harsher verses in there. Most of the harshness that Jesus had towards people was to the religious leaders that were taking advantage of their position with the community and using things like that. The Pharisees, when the disciples were picking off heads of grain, and Jesus is like, you're using the Sabbath to your benefit, when Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. We didn't say, okay, we're going to have a Sabbath, now let's create men so they can honor the Sabbath. God created the Sabbath for man, a day of rest. And in the Bible, in the Old Testament, it says, if you go out and cut your grass on Sunday or on the Sabbath, right, I should put you to death because of that. So Jesus doesn't say that. Again, contradiction. Jesus talks about the Sabbath being a day of rest. He doesn't say, if you don't observe it, you should be killed. Right? That isn't, again, one of those situations where people will come in and they're like, I read this thing. It's like, again, let's talk about it. But yeah, you brought up a good point with the community. That is 100% our focus, is to provide a safe environment where anybody of any color, any creed, any religion, any sexuality, anything can come in and feel comfortable and in an environment where they can ask difficult questions and they can talk openly with people without an immediate condemnation, or you're doing it wrong, or you had better, kind of a thing.
Why do you think that humans naturally divide into teams over belief systems when they could just be finding common ground?
It gets back to the whole polity dogma thing, right? We get together, you and I, we agree on something. And it's like, then a third person comes in there a little bit different. Well, I think you should be part of our club, sort of a thing. It's what you align on. But then when that turns into a formal, there are a number of places, and I won't identify what they are because I don't necessarily want to call them out, but where you actually have to sign your name to a number of beliefs to be able to be part of that particular organization, or your children to be part of that particular organization. And I think that's where when you come in and there's something on that list that doesn't sit right, some people just sign it, right? We don't care. But some people will be like, well, I have a problem with that. And then what they get is, well, you can't be a part because you don't believe that one thing. So then they're like, okay, well, I'm going to go start my own thing. There are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of different Christian churches in this country because of that.
Right.
Should the music have a guitar? Should the music have drums? All those different things that come into play. People with tattoos, stuff like that. Just crazy things where people focus. Our main focus is just helping people to understand, look, there's this event that happened. And this event changed the world. And it gave credibility to this man who gave us some teachings that if you pay attention to those teachings while you're here, you can have an amazing, purpose-filled, peaceful life. And it's not about when we die, we're going to go to heaven. And while we're here, we have to suffer. And repent is a big word that we hear. And sometimes, I've been to other churches where they talk about repentance, and it's, if you don't show enough guilt, you're not doing it right. I have people that have come into our church that are amazing human beings, that are much better human beings than I am, even applied to the lessons of Jesus Christ. And if they were to head to another church that had a fairly strict, dogma, if you will, of repentance, that was a huge, you have to evaluate and you have to find all those things and you have to, and people are coming in and they're like, we're interested in Jesus, but they're already volunteering. They're already helping people. They're already giving. They're already spending, their time, with their elderly neighbors. They're helping at the school. They're volunteering. They're doing all of these things to love one another. They're not pushing other people away that are different than they are. And they come in and it's like, this is a beautiful community for you to participate in. We'd love to learn a little bit more about where you found the motivation to do what it is that you do. By the way, is this Jesus fellow, that has the same teachings. This is kind of where you align, and we believe that this event occurred, and this is, why we believe it based on the gospel accounts and things along that line. And repentance is definitely something that we discuss, but Jesus kind of modeled out. He told us what to do with money. He told us what to do with relationships. He told us what to do from a priorities perspective. All of those things. And if we can get those in line, we can have, again, just an amazing life here now, where a lot of places are, you have to feel guilty for everything that you've done. When some people are coming in going, like, I've been pretty good, so.
Well, I was always taught that there will be good people in hell.
That's a good one.
I've heard that.
Because of you have to pray the prayer. It's interesting, just like when, go ahead. Sorry.
I think you already answered this, but can someone belong before they believe?
Oh my goodness. There are always people that are part of our community. And again, we're in the process of eliminating membership. It's something that we have to change within our constitution and things like that, because right now there's congregational voting. But yeah, there are a number of people that don't believe in an aspect of, what it is that we're trying to, educate people in as far as Jesus Christ is concerned. And that they're welcome there, and they're welcome there to again, just like when Jesus met Matthew, when Jesus met, the other apostles, they came along and eventually discovered that Jesus was who he said he was, the promised Messiah, God's final king for us. And it takes us time too. And I would argue that depending on where you grew up and what you grew up hearing, if you grew up in a pretty strict religious environment where you then left or deconstructed or turned, your back, whatever, it's going to take you longer to come back into a community that is practicing some sort of, spirituality or some sort of respect for Jesus. And again, I know I'm saying all kinds of words that people are going to freak out on as well, because I'm not saying it, correctly in the world. But the more trauma that they've had, the longer it takes them to get back into, I'm understanding this without the threat of going to hell.
Yeah. That kind of takes me back to, so Liz and I both went to a non-denominational Christian high school. And then we wanted to send our kids there when they were old enough, and we went and we toured the school, and they said, well, which church do you belong to? We said, we don't belong to a church. We go to a number of them. Yeah. They said, well, if you need to belong to a church to send your kid here. And we're like, well, I don't think we're willing to do that. But that church, that school, I feel really made me who I am in spite of the teachings.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think just hearing some of that beat into our heads every day. I mean, not literally. They weren't nuns.
Right.
But just hearing it over and over. And for the longest time, I would sit on it and I would really dwell on it and think, okay, this is right. And then just my life, it just felt over the years, it just felt not right. There was something off with it. There are a few things that I still hold on to.
Right.
But yeah, that's
interesting. I have no ill will towards pastors. I have no ill will towards churches. I have no ill wills towards, people that were commenting. Because, it's one of those things when you become a Christian or you find a place or you find the thing that makes you feel that connection, you think that that's what everybody else needs. And it has to be the way that you experienced it. We're not like that. We're again, my relationship with Jesus is different than everybody else's relationship with Jesus. I started to talk about it before. It's Mother's Day right now. My father was pretty much absent. He supported our family financially. I didn't see him much growing up. He was always overseas working. He got divorced when I was 16. So, the message that I gave this evening was kind of talking about the feminine aspects of God, and that, some people will say, well, God, my mother. And that just sets people off. Right. Where it's God, my father. It says right in the Bible, it's God our Father.
Well, there was a certain translation of the Bible that they made God sexless.
Oh.
I can't remember. Zondervan, I think, made it. So boycott Zondervan.
Yeah.
I think that's...
it's interesting, that they wanted it to be my impression, right? I'll never say, here's what, our group of people believe, but my impression, Jesus said, God, our Father. He wanted all of the positive attributes of a father, loving, caring, merciful, grace, but also teaching, leading. Along that line. That was my mother. That's where I experienced those things. Mm-hmm. And, it's interesting in Genesis, it says, man and woman, we made them in our image. And then there are numerous examples in the Bible of how God references maternal, scenarios. And Jesus talks about, as a hen, takes care of her chicks. That's how I want to take care of people. And there are a lot of people that would just freak out when you talk about, now my message was all around respecting women and that women are amazing and that women should be treated as equal, and the way that Jesus uplifted women. Jesus had, women that were disciples, women were the first people to talk about the resurrection. He respected women. And today I think there are a lot of denominations and churches that, take one or two verses in Timothy and say, yeah, you know what, women shouldn't preach and they shouldn't be, part of the polity of the church, if you will. But again, in those churches,
I know that word now.
They're all the ones back in the Sunday school classrooms, teaching the little kids. So yeah, I'm not quite sure what my point was with that. But
yeah, I know.
Just
that's the podcast.
Different, right? It goes where it goes.
One thing that I've heard you say over and over is, if someone comes in and disagrees with me on a point, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So I'm here to talk with you about something.
Okay.
So in our last episode, we talked about Judas a little bit, mm-hmm. and then we talked about free will. Mm-hmm. And you said how you don't believe that anyone knows what tomorrow holds. Mm-hmm. So when Judas was created, wasn't he created with that plan? Because Jesus knew it was going to happen, obviously. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about that. That's interesting.
Not to put you on the spot.
I can say that might be in podcast 3. We'll have to do that. It's definitely on the spot. Yeah, the whole free will, God knows what's going to happen to us, the whole way through. If that was predestined, if it was Judas, if it was, if there was some, what's the word I want? Spiritual, forethought to that. That's definitely something that's possible. And again, as we talked about last time, I've been wrong. And I've been wrong before, and I'm going to be wrong in the future again.
Same
and I
here,
think
brother.
That's what separates me from, a lot of people in my position. They're not willing to say, you know what, I was incorrect. I've issued, I don't know how many apologies to people that are part of the LGBTQ community because I was on this is, wrong and it's a sin, bandwagon. But yeah, I'm going to have to think about that one and dig into that. That's interesting. Very interesting. To be continued.
That wasn't a gotcha. It was just kind of,
I'm all
that's
about
something that
gotchas.
I think about a lot.
Yeah.
I want to believe that I have free will.
Yeah.
But I also feel that God is all-knowing, and he knows the steps I'm going to take throughout my life. Yeah.
Well, so people talk about a plan for your life, right? I've seen so many people that get paralyzed in their life by, do I go left or do I go right? God, what's your will? What's your plan for me? And I think that we have the lessons of Jesus to teach us. Here's how you handle your money. Here's how you handle your relationships and those types of things. We used to talk about this with our youth group. Like I believe all of our steps are not mapped out anywhere. I think that God understands what's good for us. I think God is truly sad when we misstep. But, in our lives, and again, worked with our youth on this, worked with my own kids on this, sometimes you have to take that step. And maybe you don't put all your weight on that foot, but you need to test, is this the right direction? And sometimes maybe it's 2 or 3 steps, and you figure out, what, this isn't right. I need to go back, and then I need to take that other direction. But is that all laid out in a master plan? It is definitely possible.
And again, I don't know.
Right. But in my brain, and I'll be the first one to admit that, God's brain is not my brain, but I can't fathom that if he's going to know, everything that's out there. You get into the whole, we're living in this world with all of the horrible things that are going on. And if there were a plan to, I'll never leave you or forsake you, Jesus says, I see a lot of people that are forsaken, depending on a situation that they're in that they had nothing to do with themselves getting into. And, that's where things get really, really deep when somebody comes to you and says, my kid or me or, if a loved one, family member, whatever it might be, is going through this particular thing. And if God was aware of it and all of these different things, there's so many explanations as to why that can be. And I'm not going to sit and say, well, here's exactly why, and you're not doing these things, or you need to do these things, and that everything's going to be wonderful and fantastic, because I haven't experienced that. I've experienced amazing things, don't get me wrong, but I've also experienced some very, very bad things, horrible things. And some of them were of my making, and some of them I had nothing to do with, but I found myself in the middle. So that, again, we could talk every week for the next 20 years on things like that.
You got it.
It's just, you don't know. And again, people can read and they can speculate. And then this is where I go, like your Judas question. I'm gonna look in the Bible, but then I'm gonna find some guys and find some gals that have spent some time, talking about free will and all of those different things, and that one's tabled. So note your sheet.
So that actually goes right into another point that I thought of this past week.
Yeah.
And I wrote everything down because I thought there's no way I'm going to remember everything. I'm cautious of anyone who speaks with absolute certainty about who God is, approves of, or rejects.
Yeah. I am 100% in alignment with that statement. And it's been proven over time, right? I talked about this with my daughter. I'm talking about my daughter. If you go back in time, the amount of information that we have today with the internet, with people that have studied, with people that have written books, how books can be published now online. I can write a whole bunch of things down and have it on Amazon tomorrow for sale for people to download. If you go back 30 years pre-internet, to get information, you had to go get a book, you had to go to the library, you had to buy a book, you had to find that information that way. Go back another 100 years, and it was a lot harder to get books and to get information. Go back 1,000 years, and it was even harder. So what you had was, back in 300, whatever the date was in 300, and I know that I'll get beat up by people for not knowing the exact date, when they put the Bible together, it was put together by a bunch of people that said this should be in and this should be out, and here's how we're going to move ahead. And then as time goes on, they stand on those things, and they continue to stand on those things until somebody else learns something else. And it's like, oh, well, this. And you have a group of people that say that doesn't make any sense. We're sticking to where we are. And then you have that other group that splits off. And I have a number of maps that show Christianity beginning at the resurrection, and then just all the branches that it took. And that's what happened. People went along and something didn't sit right or something didn't, jive. And it happened during the translations as well. The Bible was written in 3 different languages. It was written over, 1,000 years or so, 1,200 years, edited, re-edited, put together by a number of different people. But as time has, especially in the last 100 years, 100 years ago, the Bible was used to justify slavery, right? There were versions of the Bible where people edited out anything that was anti-slavery. And it was used to justify slavery because in the New Testament, Jesus doesn't necessarily do anything to really dispel it. So it was used. And the same thing, against women. But now I have high school kids that are coming in that have spent time studying these things because they're concerned. They heard from somebody, well, my parent, my friend, whatever, I'm going to hell, you're going to hell if you don't believe in Jesus. And that gets them digging, and they're quicker at it than we are. And they're digging into the Bible, and they're digging into tools within the Bible, and then they're digging, around the Bible, which I've been talking about, and they're coming up with this group of theologians has now debunked this particular, situation. So now you have a lot of times older men saying, well, they're incorrect. And they're more educated, they've spent more time looking into it, and they have actual physical, factual, proof to what they're saying. And this group's like, nope, that's not how we understand it. So we're moving ahead. So again, I have no problems with those groups. My problem is when somebody else comes to you and says, hey, I want to talk about this. And in the other message, it talked about, people that are in a position of teaching are held to a higher standard, during judgment. And if that's the case, you should be really interested, and you should be spending a lot of time looking at a lot of people that are smarter than you are, looking into this stuff. It's not all, well, because I have a tremendous belief and I have tremendous faith, that sets me up. And I said a prayer and I didn't feel any differently about it, so nothing's changed. When you have all these highly educated people coming and saying, this doesn't fit anymore, like it's changed.
One thing that was brought up was how your church is basically progressive or modern or something like that. And I wanted to kind of go at that a little bit, because if you look at any modern church, I mean, not modern, any church.
Yeah.
Don't you think we've all modernized a lot? Unless you're Amish.
We are 100% a progressive church. Again, taking advantage of the tools and resources that we have today that clarify confusion, that clarify things that were not clear in the past. Again, I go back to, and I'm very sorry to my, the LGBTQ community, people that are gay and people that are trans. But that's the example. There are so many medical studies, medical doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, therapists, you name it, that say, look, this is a medical, physical condition. It's not a choice. And it's funny, people that come to me and say, well, homosexual is wrong. It's like, well, when did you choose to be heterosexual? Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, if it's a choice, then did you kind of, evaluate both sides and say, I'm going to go this way?
We all start as asexual, right? I think.
So no. it's there is so much data out there now that says, and then you have theologians, linguists, language experts, cultural experts from that particular time saying, those verses don't say what you're thinking they say. And here are what they mean, given their opinion. Here's what was meant when it said, abomination, those sorts of things. It's also interesting too, when in those verses, there are other things about, wearing, clothing of mixed fabric and stuff like that. We talked about that before, but it's when there's so much in front of you that's telling you that you're wrong. The last thing I'm going to do is sit there and say, nope, I'm right. I'm not even going to listen to you. And I've run into so many people like that are, and I bought people books like here, this will explain it. There are people that look at me and, you have no credibility with me. And that's fine. Go research it for yourself. If you're truly going to research it, dig into it and come up to it yourself. But that we are 100% progressive. The car I drive today is not like the first Pinto, that I had that cost $1,800 or something.
You should be on a horse and buggy.
And everything has progressed, right? It's talked about in politics as well. Progressive, democracy.
You want to get into that a little bit? Get into some politics.
Maybe we should leave that for another one. We can talk about Christian nationalism.
Yeah.
Christianity is just being hijacked today in so many different ways, and it's just amazing to me how a lot of churches have just jumped on. It's interesting, they unveiled a golden statue of the president at a golf course yesterday, and there were a number of religious people there to dedicate it. And reading the Bible, which I do a lot, it's all about not recognizing idols, having nothing to do with idols. You shouldn't, that's not a thing. Veggie Tales with the bunny.
The bunny.
I don't remember that.
Oh my God.
I just remember the hairbrush.
King Nebuchadnezzar, right? When it built the big, golden statue. But it's there were religious people there dedicating a golden statue of, again, that's a whole nother, we should just do an episode on Christian nationalism.
These are not rapid fire.
Okay.
I feel like some of them may be a little quicker, but I am curious to know what you think. I wanted to do this a little bit differently, so I invited some of my friends, some people who commented, viewers, what questions they have for you.
Sure.
So question number 1 is from Sam. What's your favorite horror movie?
Ooh, favorite horror movie. Friday the 13th.
Have you watched it in 3D?
I have not. I was at the age when that came out, seeing it at the theater, and it was brand new. And it was, that one definitely left a mark.
There's another Friday the 13th this year. I think it's November.
Oh, really?
So come on over.
Okay.
Movie night. This may take a little longer because I think you mentioned this on Wednesday. You kind of hinted at your belief on this is different from a lot of teachings.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
But it was crazy that this person asked me this. This was from Nick. He said, I'm interested in what he thinks about the temptation in the desert.
The temptation of the desert. When Jesus was tempted?
Yeah.
So, my take on the temptations, a lot of people are like, that's Satan and that's the devil. And, people are, again, back to hell. And they have, their relationship with Jesus is 100% focused on the fear of hell and the devil. And they're constantly, anything negative happens in their life, it's of the devil and it's of the devil. And we have to put on the armor of God every morning. And I know people that actually get up and pray that prayer and actually physically go through the motions of putting on the breastplate and putting on, all the different things because they're just scared. My interpretation, and I'm not the only one, and again, this is something that I've looked into and researched as well. My interpretation of those 3 temptations was all around worldly, thing. I'll give you the kingdoms of the world and, all of that. And it just really gets into, power and control and all of those different things. And Jesus came to be last. He came to be a servant. He didn't come to be a king that was going to be a king like the Israelites really, really wanted. When they talked about the Messiah and Jeremiah and Isaiah and all the people that were waiting for him, they expected Jesus was going to come and he was going to be this king that was going to take out Rome and put Israel back where it was supposed to be. And that's not what he did. He came and you need to serve. You need to, I came as a servant, to serve mankind. He washed the feet of his disciples at the Passover meal. So to me, the temptations that were there are the temptations that we have, as human beings to, obtain more, to get ahead, to, you watch any advertisement this day, it's all about what you don't have. The newer things out there, you're not going to be cool if you don't have this particular thing. And now all the influencers and all of that. And it pulls us away from loving other people. And that's, happening so much now in our political system. A lot of people think that it's left and right when it's really top and bottom. You have a whole bunch, not a whole bunch. You have a number of very, very, very wealthy people. We're approaching having our first trillionaire pretty soon. And in my opinion, they're kind of pulling the strings of politicians, both parties.
Yes.
I think it's a little more prominent on one party, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of comments on that one. But it's the, how much is enough? My wife and I, we don't have anywhere near what we probably should have in a retirement account. I don't ever plan on retire. I don't know what you do when you retire. Anyhow, I've seen a lot of people that retire and, they just kind of sit around. But anyhow, it's because we, see somebody that let's just go get that for them. A lot of people are, well, you give it to the church and then the church takes care of it and stuff like that. And we do that as well. But if somebody needs something, you just, you take it out. And again, we think what we have in our retirement account and the way that we're planning on, handling later, life is fine with us. But if you look at a financial advisor, right? Somebody that's also invested in you because they're making money off of you and want you to, do those things. It's, it's just different. So again, my back to the original question. If you, like we talked about last time, if you read those verses and you pull the satanic aspect out of it, right? It's called the tempter. And you look at it from a worldly things, worldly wants and desires, it fits perfectly. And that's the problem that we're having today, right?
I'll tell you what is crazy. Partway through that, I completely forgot what the question was. I don't know how you were able to come back.
That took me a second there. No, I've actually had that conversation with a lot of people because it gets back into the whole, hell devil thing again. We don't have people, I'm sure people start out coming, but once they've come and once you've had some conversations and once you get to know people and then you talk to other people that have kind of come along on this journey where, Jesus focused on, loving other people. He the warnings that he gave were around materialism and around money and all this. And I'm sure people are going to say, well, he talked about the millstone around, somebody's neck and, those sorts of things. He did. But those were all warnings about normal repercussions that are going to come by your own choices, right? I think the example that I gave last time, if I go out and buy a vehicle that's way too expensive for me, I'm in trouble, right? I'm not going to be able to make the payment. It puts my family at, all of those different things. It's just back to materialism.
Third question. This is from Anthony. I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on the problem of evil. It is simply because there is evil in the world, God cannot be all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good. If he's not allowed to interfere or needs to test us, then he's not all-powerful.
Okay, so I'm going to hone in immediately. You're going to have to read that again for me, but the testing part. I don't believe that God is testing us. He didn't create us to test us. I don't think there's a grand, I'm going to put a lot of people use Job, in that scenario where Job, book of the Bible, I think it was, when it was added, it's something that's useful, right? If you're trying to, kind of bring people along in your world, it was very useful to people that were putting together churches, a long time ago. But don't believe that God is testing us. My own kind of, I don't know what happened in the garden, Adam and Eve, I know what happened, right? And then they were out of the garden. And whether that put us on a tract where, we're kind of on our own and, whether it was that, whatever it is. And again, if somebody else can explain it to me, a lot of people have explained it, but not in a way that makes sense. And I don't think I'm going to get that answer. Excuse me, but my take on this, and we don't talk about it a lot at church because it's something that it's just out there. I think that set us on a course when Adam and Eve were like you're out of the garden now, you're going to kind of head in your own direction. That set off whatever it set off. And whether God's kind of out there going, well, now you started this thing and I can't jump in on it. And that doesn't make a lot of sense in a lot of different places. Again, there's another thing we could talk about every week for the next 20 years. It's when people are, dying of cancer in the hospital. And it's like, well, why can't? I don't have an answer for you. Like I can speculate, I can do those things, but whatever occurred where God isn't going like, okay, I'm going to make this better and I'm going to make this better. And then where's the line where you make it better? Do I take care of cancer? And do I kind of let you skin your knee on the whole, financial thing? Go ahead and do the bankruptcy, whatever. I don't think it's like that. I think that, we're living here with one another. And Jesus is like, look, if you cared for one another, it'd be an amazing place. Because you're going to be able to get through the things that you have to get through because of where everything is. And again, I know that's way disjointed and way out, but I haven't heard anybody else explain it except that it's Satan and it's the devil and it's, all these evil things that are coming after you, and it's a competition, and it's an all-powerful God. And it just gets back into the why would God create? But anyhow, so that was the testing part. But could you read the question again?
The first...
Anthony.
Yeah, so that was the second part. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the problem of evil. It is simply because there is evil in the world, God cannot be all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good. Can I tell you my response?
Yeah.
And again, I don't know anything. I haven't studied theology. I went to a non-denominational high school. That's my credential.
Yeah, me too.
I feel that God created evil. I feel that he created sin. Like if God created...
I think you have to define evil and you have to define sin.
Well, you defined sin last time.
I did. And I stand on that. Mm-hmm. I don't think sin is people talk about inherent sin and we're born with this thing. And I think that's where people, like a serial killer, right? Like, where does that come from? I think people have mental diseases that kind of take them down those roads, or abuse that they suffered, or, whatever it is. But the sin piece to me is truly, if you read the Bible and where they talk about sin, and it's that doing something that's going to harm you or it's going to harm other people. I still, stand on that particular piece. But it's the I don't believe that there's this evil force. And again, I know a lot of people are going to come back and say, you're a heretic and you're, all those different things. But I know where Gehenna and Sheol and Satan and all of those things are mentioned. But again, paying attention to really smart people that have looked at this and, in the Bible, here's another way to look at it. And that way makes sense to me. And again, it's not anything that you have to believe, this particular way. Right. That helps me. And it's, I having believed that for a long time, I haven't encountered, and I've gone through some very difficult times in my life, and I never once thought, well, that's the devil. He's coming after me. It was this particular situation happened, and this is the ramification of it. And again, some of it was me, and some of it was other people. But I'm standing firm on I don't think I have to the whole God creating that in my world, and that's an interesting discussion. I don't think he did, but I'll have to dig in a little bit. That's an interest. I've never heard it put that way. I've heard it in another way, but
if there is a Satan, a Lucifer, whatever, who created him?
God would have had to, right?
Yeah.
That's my.
So,
well, somebody say he's a fallen angel. He's jealous. I've heard all sorts of ways, to kind of explain it. None of them have really made sense when you take everything else into account. It doesn't fit. And again, Jesus. If the biggest thing in our lives moving forward was going to be evil, he didn't talk a lot about that. Now, his modeling that he did was all about taking care of one another and, trying to take down some of the systems that were being used to, hurt people or keep people down. When he left, he said, hey, I just want you to care for one another. And, and I saw one of the comments about, the guy was all love. That's all, that's what he's boiled everything down to. And yes, if me as a parent, right, I look at my beautiful children and I look at what makes them happy. I look at where they see success. I look at what brings them purpose and fulfillment. It's not coming to me saying, Dad, you're fantastic. You're the best dad in the world. We're going to take a whole day and we're going to, you're go dad. When I see them helping other people, when I see them caring for one another, when I see them sacrificing money or time to, help somebody in need, that makes me feel amazing as their parent. And I really believe when, Jesus talking about, God, our Father, and Jesus, like, if you know me, you know the Father. He didn't say, hey, I want you to get together every week and I want you to spend, 3 worship songs with your hands in the air, saying Jesus, 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 Jesus the whole time. We really just try to pay attention to do this. And that's what we try to do. But back to the evil thing. I'm just not I don't see it or experience it the way that people explain it to me.
Okay, so this is not one of these questions. Okay. Last time you defined sin.
Yeah.
Can you define love?
Love is that's one of those, what it is, but you can't explain it. Love, I can just give you a whole bunch of examples, right? It's the, not reacting when, somebody, the person that speeds by you, on the road, it's assuming that they're trying to get to the hospital because of a loved one of theirs. It's, sacrificing my time to help somebody that's, struggling. It's showing somebody compassion. It's showing somebody care. It's showing somebody grace. It's, it's so many different things, and it's a lot of actions, but I think love is, behind why we do the things that we do.
That's a great answer.
Well, it's one of those like, oof. I wish I would have got that one before.
You didn't get anything
before. I know. Goes where it goes.
Okay, this is from Dan, not me, Dan.
Yeah.
This is kind of a big U-turn. What are your thoughts on the Book of Enoch and the beings mentioned in it?
Oh, geez. I have to go back and read Enoch.
Okay.
To be continued.
So Dan and I, we have lengthy conversations about extraterrestrials.
Gotcha.
UAPs,
Yep.
So, and I wonder, so this is actually a question I wanted to ask you last time, but completely it went where it went.
Mm-hmm.
If there are extraterrestrials, what does that do to theology? What does it do to the structures that we have set up, if anything?
I guess we'd have to listen to them to see what's going on out there. I mean, there are a number of denominations that talk about, when you pass away or when God comes, whatever the scenario is, people are going to be on different planets, and some people inherit their own planets and things like that. It gets out there.
The egg theory. That's the one I've mentioned it
Chicken
to you
and
before. No, it's basically you live every existence.
Oh yeah.
And so you experience everything, and then at the end of that, this is probably wrong, but I believe you basically become a god of your own.
Gotcha.
But that's an interesting one.
Yeah, things like that where it's the come back as, or come back, in general. It's the being that I am, right? If I lived before, that life is just a complete throwaway because I don't remember any of it if it occurred, right? And I don't, if we truly believe in our soul, why wouldn't that go with you in a scenario like that? It would be a waste. We're just or here's a soul, let's empty it out and then we'll fill it up again, something that I'm not a believer in. We come back in some way, shape, or form.
I will send you sometime this week. I think it's the Infographics YouTube channel. They did a video on it. They explain it a lot more eloquently than I do. Okay. But I am curious your thoughts on that. So, okay, last question. This is from September, and I think this floored me when I read it. How can we awaken the spirit of unity within our communities when the world is so divided by theology and identity?
So, it's interesting. The identity that we try to have as a community is just caring for other people. I mean, we're not, again, when you walk through our doors, you can say, I don't believe in Jesus Christ. It's like, fantastic. Where would you like to sit? Would you like a cup of coffee or, some water for the service? Unity comes in creating space for different ways of viewing things when it comes to theology. Again, what we have is this collection of writings that a lot of people disagree on. And when you start, people always talk about the hill that you die on, kind of a thing. Like when you're raising your kids, it's not a hill that I want to die on. So you kind of let them, get away with that,
so
that
many of
thing.
Those hills.
Yeah, there are teenagers. We just, like I said, I have no ill will towards any of the people that commented, the other churches that kind of take, and believe me, it's not just that message that I heard. There are a number of churches that look at us saying they're not biblical, they're not Bible-based, they're heathens, they're heretics, they're, all those things. And that's fine. Until you've come and experienced us and have some curiosity about what we're doing and how we're doing it. It's great that you're doing your thing. I don't want to get in the way of what you're doing. Happy to, talk about, differences that we have. I'm not telling you that, we'll change, but if you come to me and say, here's this thing that I've researched and looked into, we're not going to immediately say you're wrong. And again, I think that's one of the things that kind of made me sad about the message from the pulpit that, you couldn't even get through it. And they're heretics. And, I'm trying to keep you out of hell and things like that. When there was no, hey, like, explain to me where you're coming from, or explain to me, like, I know I'm older than him. I've been around longer. I've experienced more life. And, people that have no respect for different views, I think, is where we all go wrong. I've studied with Jehovah's Witnesses. I've studied with Jewish people. I've studied with all sorts of different Christian denominations. Had a lot of conversations with atheists, agnostics. I've read a lot of books, including the Bible. And, we need, Jesus came and he just said, look, you had all those rules before as Israel. I can't, that's all fulfilled. Don't worry about that anymore. Moving ahead, it's all nations. Good news of great joy for all people. And, before, when people were coming up to me, the Pharisees were saying, hey, what's the greatest commandment? And what can I do to get to heaven? And things like that. And Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. And he was quoting the Torah. And then he gets to, and love your neighbor as yourself. And he changed that at the end of his ministry when he was talking to his disciples in the upper room with the Last Supper. He said, look, a new command I give you. I want you to love one another as I have loved you. Meaning, when we were in the midst of everything that we were in the midst of, right? Jesus cared for and loved us. He was talking to the apostles. When you were in unbelief, when you were not quite sure, when you were thinking about walking away after some of those sermons I gave, I still loved you. Like we were all still together. Like there were different viewpoints. There were different things that, we went through, and I still loved you. And Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, which was given many, 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 many times, people think that that's just a one and done. He gave that message many times. And, with all of those messages in there, being meek, mild, focusing on other people, that's where we can find unity. We help a whole lot of people that actually are affiliated with other churches and other groups and other organizations. We spend a lot of time focusing on the marginalized. We give a lot to the Trevor Project and folks that are part of, LGBTQ and trans, help groups. The government in a number of states have now, there's a warning label. I forget the state, but it's any... I'm going to get it wrong. I'll correct it in the future. But it's basically a warning about transgender. And it's transgender people don't need a warning. They need understanding. They need compassion. They need people to understand, what they're going through. They don't need large groups of people saying, you're going to hell because you're sinning because of this decision that you made, when they didn't make any decision. That's who they are. That's how they're created and how they're made. Unfortunately, they're in the wrong body. Or, again, we talked about gender and sexuality last time. But unity, it's so tricky because for most people, unity is having the same belief. And the minute that you start doing that, if you went to every single person in our community and you listed 25 different things out of the Bible, you're not going to find one thing that every single person's going to say, yep, that. Maybe if it were, I believe in the resurrection, everybody would probably agree on that. But if you got into all of the nitty gritty and the nitpicky, theology pieces and parts, people are going to disagree. Again, no archaeological evidence that the walls of Jericho tumbled, right? But people are like, no, it happened.
Didn't they find Noah's Ark? I think I heard that.
No, it's proven.
Okay.
Not the case. All sorts of geological studies and, the government wouldn't let them up in. And there are all sorts of, but again, if you dig into and really find, fact, it is not Noah's Ark. There's one in Kentucky, though, that you can go see and tour and pay to get in to see. Anyhow, that's a whole nother thing. But
I think my most, I value the last episode and this episode, but I think the most eye-opening episode that I've ever recorded was with a trans person. And
They're
it
amazing.
was phenomenal. And I think it's so hard because you gave the example of taking a couple out to eat before. I think it's just so, I feel like I can't ask questions because it's like, if you ask questions, then you're like trying to fight with us or something. But just to sit down and have an open conversation about it was eye-opening.
I am so motivated by people that are a part of marginalized communities. They are so strong and they have dealt with so much that have just, really just set them off, on a course. The trans and the people within the LGBTQ community, I guess that's the easiest way to say it, per capita are probably better Jesus followers. And a lot of them don't even know it, but because of what they've been through, they are so caring. They are so understanding. They're so willing to take the time to walk with you through anything that you're going through. Now, again, don't get me wrong. People that are not LGBTQ are also that way within our community as well. But when you look at just, people outside of our community, I am just absolutely amazed and motivated by that group to help them. Again, you're dealing with a group of people that struggle with something that a lot of times they think, I'm better off dead than having to, move forward in my life. So I'm so thankful for, those that are strong and then choose to help other people through it.
Well, Paul, I still have a lot of questions. I'm sure you
Next
still
week.
have a lot of questions.
I do.
But I do truly believe that honest questions are better than weaponized certainty.
Yeah. I 100% agree on that. I need to get back to you on Enoch and Judas.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good one. I appreciate the, it's interesting. I had a conversation with somebody from our church that listened to our podcast, and they're like, you guys sounded like the discussions that we have, like in small group, or the conversations that we've had, like in a coffee shop or something along that line. Because it's, again, if you come up with a creed, and a lot of people, have a creed, or they have, more of a broad creed, but you can be part of our group if you have this, you're good. But people coming in saying, I don't fit in those other places, like, you'll fit right in here then, because most of us here came from that world. So, but I always appreciate the time talking to you. I learn, and I'm stretched, which is a wonderful thing.
Okay, the next episode, I want to talk with you about how I can start my own religion, because I've talked with Liz about this for years.
You're in.
And I just, I'd like to get out of paying taxes. I would like to have, I don't know, just
you might
out.
find my take on church taxes pretty interesting. But I definitely want to talk about Christian nationalism with you.
Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah. Until next time.
Sounds good, Dan.
Yeah.
Thanks. Appreciate it. That's fun.
As always.
Judas, you stumped me.